Hey guys, we are back to continue discussing Genesis 7. We stopped on verse 3, and we're going to go on to verse 4. So it says, chapter 7, verse 4, "For after 7 more days I am sending rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and shall wipe from the face of the earth all that stand that I created." All right, so this is the Lord explaining that he is wiping it out. And look at verse 5. No, I can't talk. Look at verse 5. "And Noah did according to all that the Lord, Yahweh, commanded him." And again, that's Yahweh, so that's the merciful one, the loving one. He's doing everything that the Lord's asking him. Remember, Noah has been called a righteous one. He's Tamim. Remember, he's perfect in his ways. We talked about him being a preacher, and we also talked about Methuselah is alive in this part. All right, this time, because Methuselah, so remember his name means, and his death shall bring. So we know that the Lord has just told him 7 more days. The last time the Lord gave him a time, it was 120 years. That was the beginning of chapter 6. And now it's, okay, we're down to 7 days, all right? For after 7 more days, I mean, you want to talk about you've been getting ready. He's been building the ark. He's been, preparing. He's already been told that the animals are going to come to him, those that are pure DNA, those who are representing each species, each type of animal are coming to him. And now's the day. I mean, here's the week. Here we go. All right. If we know that in, if we know that in the time that Methuselah dies and his death shall bring, then this tells us that, well, either Methuselah just died or he's going to be dying here any day. It's thought that the after 7 more days is a hint that Methuselah dies, and then there's 7 days allowed to mourn his death. And that's why there's 1 week. That's just a suggestion, something that's talked about. It's said that it's called Shiva, which means that they mourn for 7 days. And when they do that when a family member dies. And while that's very possible, we also know that, well, he's getting ready during these days. Now, it's also said by some that this is a hint that Noah and his family went into the ark and were there just for 7 days hanging out, just waiting. And then the Lord shut the door, and then the waters came. While that sounds great, that tends to be the verses or the idea that people use for a pre-tribulation rapture. Now, we know for sure there is a rapture. There is the coming of the Lord, calling up his saints. Those who are dead in Christ will rise and meet him in the sky. Absolutely, no doubt about that. The real controversy is at what time. Will it be before any trouble comes? Will it be in the middle of the trouble, right before the wrath of the bowls in Revelation comes? Or will it be at the end, after all things, when his second coming comes? When his second coming happens. Not going to discuss, this is where you seek and you look at the word and you see what lines up with the pattern, not the doctrine of man, but the pattern in the Bible. But regardless, let's look at this 2 ways. One, we could say, well, they're in the ark and they're mourning for 7 days, just hanging out. The door's wide open. Well, I don't know. A part of me goes, well, I bet some other people would have been coming in if the door's open, kind of thinking, what's going on here? Maybe some of Noah's other family. Who's to say? But then again, there's the thought that actually this is the warning or the heads up that you got 7 more days to get everything done. If that's the case, then these are active days. These are days of preparation. These are be prepared. That kind of really fits more with the pattern that the Lord sets for us of being prepared. I mean, how gracious that he gives us gave Moses gave Noah the 120 days, and now 7 days. He does that with us too. He gives us a timeline to set, to understand. He gives us the Word of God with prophecies so we can look at it and kind of see where we are in that reoccurring cycle of each generation. So he's told that the Lord is sending the rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Let's talk about this. The word 40, or the number 40, standing on its own, this is really the first time we see it. 40 is a number that is often associated with trials and testing. I would think, having it rain for 40 days and 40 nights, that's trials and testing. I mean, you're not just floating in a boat or an ark. You're literally just having water slamming down. You're having rain. You're having all kinds of water coming up from the ground. You're having pressure from all sides. I think that's a good way to put it. While in the ark, there's pressure from all sides. And then we see 40 in several places. Think about it. Let's see. We have fasting for 40 days. We have Moses who did that. We have Yeshua who did that. Or Jesus, excuse me. We have, what's the other name? Elijah who fasted for 40 days. Ezekiel laid on his side for 40 days, which gets interpreted into 40 years. Let's see, what else is 40? Oh, goodness gracious. On the Mount Sinai, Moses is for 40 days twice. Oh, and how about the most obvious? You have Israel in the wilderness for 40 days. You have Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days. Now, here's a thought. We also have in Revelation, we have the 42 months for the 3.5 years. It makes me wonder if, lining up with this pattern, if maybe of the 42 months, 2 months will be maybe a little less trial, more of a preparation, and then those 40 months are the real trials, the testing, the preserving. Just a thought, because again, it lines up. But anyway, there's several 40s in the Bible. When you see them, I can't think off the top of my head where it doesn't have to do with some sort of testing or trials. And again, that is to preserve and to strengthen and to let us see who we are so we can stand firmly in the Lord. So 40 might not be such a bad thing. Oh, another thing I thought of too was 40 years after Messiah, after Jesus, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. There's another 40. And all right, so let's go on. So we see in verse 5 that Noah does according to all that the Lord commanded. We have that also, that saying with others. I mean, Abraham in Genesis 26 is told, because he kept the commandments, the laws, the commandments, the laws, and the ordinances, because he kept them all, he did them all, right? And then we have Moses, who is said to have done all that he was told. We have the children of Israel who are told to have done all that he was told. We know Jesus does all that he is told, right? We have all the forefathers. We have great examples. Do you know that in Revelation 14, I think it's 12, it says that the saints are those who do all that they're told? All that's been commanded, they do. So obviously, all the way to the end, this is going to be a quality of a righteous person, one who walks in the Lord's ways, has to do the things, all that's commanded in order to walk in his ways. Again, not a salvation issue, but definitely what are you going to do with your salvation, and how are you going to reflect Jesus? Absolutely. All right. So let's go to verse 6. It says, "Now Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters were on the earth." 600 years old. It has been said that possibly the flood started on his birthday. That's possible. It also could just be that in his 600th year, this is it. Which makes me go, oh, when I think of the 600s or anything 1 through 7, I immediately go to the idea of the millenniums. And I'm like, yep, the 6th millennium, that's going to be, that's what we're at now. It's pretty bad. Meaning we just get progressively terrible. And then the 7th millennium is where Messiah reigns. It's the rest. Well, I kind of see that here. And again, this is just really loose, but just helping us think in patterns. In the 600th, right, going into that, there's this trial, being inside the ark, being inside, everything's destroyed. And granted, that is the 600th year. And then for the next 100 years going into the 700th year, I kind of see that like, while things are building up, I should say, there is a rest. I mean, think about it. It's all brand new. It's brand new, building to that 700th. My gosh, I am so tongue-tied today. Anyhow, all right. So it says in verse 7, and Noah and his sons and his sons' wives went into the ark because of the waters of the flood. That right there explains it all. To me, that says they were not in there for 7 days. They went in because of the flood, because of the water. They knew, there was no question, to me, according to this verse. And then if we go down to verse 13, it says, on that same day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife and their three wives of his sons went into the ark. So it says on that same day. But if we go up, I'm skipping around just so we see this. When we go up to verse 11, this tells us what that same day was. It says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second new moon, the 17th day of the new moon, on the day all the foundations of the great deep were broken up and the windows of heaven were open. See, that's the same day. So that's why from what my study is, I don't think that they sat in the ark for 7 days twiddling their thumbs. Because God is a God of action. He wants his people to be a God of action, not just sitting. He didn't create life for us to just coast through. We're to experience life. We get our hands in the dirt. We are a part of it. That's what's so important. And that's what Noah's doing. Noah is inviting in the animals. He's getting everything set so that when that door is shut, it's done. It's done. So I really do believe that they were not in until when the water started. All right. So I'm going back up to 8. Skipping around. It says, of the clean beast and of the clean beast and of the beasts that are unclean and of the birds and of all the creeping things on earth, 2 by 2 they went into the ark to Noah, male and female, as Elohim had commanded Noah. So here they go. That again, this is what's happening in these 7 days. Now, when you look in chapter 7, something interesting is happening. We have 3 sets of 3. We have the Lord reminding, hey, about the animals that are going into the ark. We have the Lord reminding, hey, I'm flooding the earth. Okay? We're going to have these 40 days and 40 nights. And then we have this reminder, hey, I'm killing everything that's on the earth. Everything. So we have these reminders. Everything in 2s and 3s are to be a testimony. It is to be a witness. So I kind of find that the Lord is setting up his own witness to say, not only is it going to happen, but because I've said it, it is a done deal. It's a done deal. Here's the witness to it. I just find it interesting as we see in 3 different parts, and then it's set up kind of saying the same thing, 3 different sections. And I don't know, chapter 7 is interesting. But anyway, so let's look at verse 10 again. It says, and after the 7 days, the waters of the flood were on the earth. All right, and here we go again. On the 600th year of Noah's life. And then we have the second new moon. We have some exact dates given. Now, there's 2 things I want to say about chapter 7, verse 11. Let's look at the first one. The first one is, this is after the 7 days, okay? So, again, there's 7 days of no water, and then, bam, it happens. There is this opening up of the waters of the deep and the waters of the heaven. The treasures of both have opened. Now, if you think about it, we have the flood, we have the waters that are upon the earth in Genesis 1, 2, right? 1:1's great, 1:2, flood. Well, somehow the waters happen. Now, we know in Genesis 1, I think it's 6 through 8, that the Lord separates those waters. Remember, we have the firmament, and we have those that go into the earth. We have both kind. They're opening up. I'm like, oh my gosh, so the Lord totally just stored them there for the flood. I totally believe that. I mean, he knows everything. He just stored them up. But before that Genesis 1-2 water event, water came from somewhere. I kind of see what's happening in chapter 7 as a reminder of what happened between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. This flood happened. Remember, evil, Satan fell, and then this flood comes and wipes out the earth, and then it's recreated. I see the same thing. We have had, oh my gosh, in chapter 6, we saw the enemy, we saw man completely destroying what God created. And then there's this flood. So here where we see the breaking apart of the waters, I don't see that lining up with Genesis 1:6 as much as I see this lining up with Genesis 1, between 1:1 and 1:2. All right, I want to say that. The next thing I want to say about that verse is we have very specific dates, and it says the second new moon. Now, I need to say something about the calendar. I don't know if I've said this before or not, but in Genesis, the calendar, the Hebrew calendar, is different than the Hebrew calendar after Exodus 12. When the Lord pulls Israel out of Egypt, he changes their calendar to start, the first of the calendar, to start counting Israel as a nation. The whole world acknowledges at this time the beginning of a year, so that'd be month number 1, the beginning of the year as what we would call today Tishri. That's in the fall. That's our September, October. So when we read this and it says the second month, that's our October, November, all right? But after Israel leaves Egypt, it's going to change. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But I want that to be understood, because if we understand where the counting comes from, the whole world is counting the same way right now. Because right now this has to do with the age of the earth, the age of God's creation, all right? So the second month, the 17th day, is what we call Hashavan. I probably don't say it right, but Hashavan. It's the second month. On the 17th, we celebrate. I don't celebrate, it's probably the wrong word. We acknowledge that that's when the floodwater started. This year, with the elections of 2020, on that day is the day after the election. That is the day that I believe the first lawsuit was started to be filed for the recounting and for during the election. Now, you may be like, who cares? Why are you bringing that in? That's because in verse 13, it says, on that same day. All right, on that same day, that phrase actually means more than just on that day. That same day is, it kind of points to a new era. And what it's saying is, on that day is when a new era of life began. It was the removing of the old and the bringing in the new. It was the changing of how we saw things. And I really saw this year as that was the change of the way, for here in America, that was the change of the way that we do things, that we've seen things. I have no idea what it's going to look like in the end, but I know that the Lord showed me that that was very significant this year, that date. And again, like we said, everything happens in a cycle, which tells us that any year if we pay attention to the Hebraic calendar, we can look at things going on around us, and there will be pertinent things happening on those dates that should be used to get our attention, to keep our attention. Okay, so let's end on that. We will come back and talk a little bit more about these dates and how they work. And then we will hopefully finish chapter 7. So have a great day, great evening, and thank you so much for spending time with me. Bye.